Hello, YouTube! Your favorite Frenchie over here on the microphone. This is a little video following up the other video for if it's the follow up for the or zoonotic disease or infectious disease. Um, for those that didn't see the other video, basically what I was mentioning is that a lot of preparation is about the security of human versus human. Or the people, pandemics, and again in the pandemic, how people can transmit the disease. And I did a course on online on infectious disease, and they were talking about how zoonotic disease, there's 75% or 60 to 70%, depending on the study you look, that they come straight from the reservoir, so from animals to human. That's mostly the transmission on. So Ebola is one of them, influenza is another one, rabies is another one. So there's a bunch of them that are like this, and so I got interested in that topic, and so I wanted to follow up with some of ideas. And again, I'm not an expert in that, as you just said. I just kind of followed this course there, but I think it's becoming very important for the preparation, and I like it because it's kind of has two components. It's kind of the medical component to it, but also the security of it, and of it. So I wanted to share a few of the ideas that I kind of trotting in my head there from what I've been reading and everything. And I've been reading a lot of it on it, and also share a few of the website that I found that are a pretty good resource. So a lot of the website you'll see, the first thing is some image of what an animal would look like. Obviously, if we go with the scenario that everything is shut down, then there's no internet and everything. Okay, we'll go with that one. But it would be easy to print those. There's a lot of the tables that I printed, and now it's part of my first aid, my portable clinic, because that would be the kind of stuff that I would need to know on some of the disease. So it's pretty well done, and it's actually many pages, like 12 pages that I printed. I think it was back and forth as well, but it's well done. It's like the disease, what you should look like, the signs and symptoms, and everything and stuff. And also the one with the pictures are even nicer, so you see like pigs with what they would look like, what their recognition on their nose. So some of those websites will be at the bottom, and yeah. So basically, what I came kind of with, it's a little bit like any infectious disease. There's three ways of really fighting well, and the best way is prevention. So what I see is pretty much of three steps. Four step if you want to put the treatments. But the first step would be the prevention. So how you can prevent A for B, and also I'll put a link. I keep talking about that cheese, Swiss cheese kind of theory, but I'll try to put the real link that explain the stuff. But basically, between A and B, so you and an event that you never wanted to happen, if you can put some safety in between, then that event has less chance of occurring, because every safety that you put has pros and cons, and those cons is basically the holes in the Swiss cheese. And for the event to happen, all those holes has to be straight so that the events can happen. And so there's a few safety that I thought I would be sharing, and hopefully the discussion will happen. It would be good to put in place for the prevention part of it. The second one, so then when the prevention fails, so when B happened, would be the recognition of it. So that would be kind of step two. So you have to recognize there's something is going on, and again, before that it's becoming a pandemic. And this is how most of the, Ebola case, it would be nicer if you recognize them when there's 2 cases than when there's 300 cases. So it's really important, especially if you're going to be a small community, to recognize very quickly if there's 1 or 2 cases, or there's something going on, or your hunting ground there's something going on in that region to close it and to take action to it, which would be the third step, would be to take action. And then the action we'll talk a little bit, but there would be different ones depending on what's the situation as well. And obviously, if all those fails, then would be how you treat it. And this is where it would be nice to have some of those documents, because if you know now that, because don't forget that a lot of those websites, when you read about them, it's about evaluation and everything, but we have access. They have access to lab DNA, like organism like CDC and the World Health Organization, that could monitor those by taking a swab or something and then identifying the actual organism that is doing whatever they're seeing on the ground. But it's very unlikely that small community would have access to that kind of techniques. So it would be more about recognizing by sign and symptoms and the history. So you see X, then that means Y. So that's why those pictures are pretty interesting, because then you can have a high suspicion, and then you can know, because obviously some are vector-borne, we call. So basically that means it's transmissive, like Lyme disease, which is a tick. So then that means that it's not as the same thing that as an Ebola, which is in transmission by contact with fluids, versus another one. Even there's some of them, what I was reading is that they're transmittable by the meat that you eat. And I know, like, when I did a few classes on wilderness medicine, there's even, I forgot what name was it, but there's even fish, even if you cook them and everything, the bacteria or the infection that is inside is not killed by the heat. So you can cook your fish, you can do whatever, it doesn't taste bad, it doesn't smell bad, there's no discoloration or anything, but it's in there. And then once it's in the body, it does some weird reorganization. So basically it's just by dromodrome that we call it. Basically it means like the sign and symptoms is attached to that disease. So this is how you recognize. So that's why those diagrams is very interesting. So let's go back to the first. For the prevention part, what I was thinking, what's really important is to separate a lot of the things. So, for example, if you have a lot of hunters, so if you're becoming a hunter and gathering community, because that's with crops and everything, make sure that whatever enclosed environment that you have, that the outside doesn't contaminate your inside. And I think the good way of being sure that you don't prevent this is that would be like, for example, the group of people that would go hunting have to follow very rigid when they bring back. So let's say they catch a deer or something, when they come back, and then not only that, the deer has to be in a different section than any other animals, just like the cows or the dog, even the dogs or the cats or whatever farm animals or any domestic animals that you have inside that thing, that they make sure that it doesn't go through it. But obviously, if I touch it, then that means, let's say I'm the hunter, I come back from my hunt, I have a dog, I pet the dog goes somewhere else, and as you can see now, the transmission has started. So to have very specific protocols that, for example, if you come back, you clean your hands with a certain substance, you have certain clothes, for example, to go hunting. If it's a small community and you kind of turn around, so like one day you can be hunting, the second day you're in the field, well then maybe have 2 or 3 days in between that, so that way like you don't bring, or you don't have the same clothes when you go in the field, or if you take care of the cows the next day, and you don't have this transmission. So that would be one way, I think, of prevention. And yeah, so that would be kind of a good way of doing, for make sure that whatever you can not be in contact, because sometimes you won't even know, because there's some disease. For example, I was reading an article here on where I live now, that some of the rats has a certain disease in their urine. Well, it doesn't affect them. Like they're not sick. They don't look sick. But if it goes to the human, so when it transmits to the human, then the human gets sick with whatever the rats are. It's a little bit the same thing as scorpion. The venom doesn't affect them because they have developed their immune system against the venom. But if you get poked with their venom, then you're reacting to it. So it's a little bit sometimes same thing with some infectious disease. So that would be one way of making sure that you separate groups that do that go outside, that come back inside. So having procedure like a little bit like decontamination, cleaning their clothes, boots, having protective on the boots, I presume, or like I said, having different clothes if you're gonna work on to make sure that you don't bring the disease inside the closed environment. Also, identification. So then the second part could be kind of in two different parts, a little bit part between the prevention and the identification, is that report, and this will be very important. So anybody that start to feel any sign and symptoms should be reporting it and have like a form of some sort, like any sign and symptoms, even like a rash that people would be like, no, it's just a rash, to be reporting them at all, so that way somebody monitor those and make sure that okay, there's a rash on X, and what did he do, where did he go, and keep kind of a logbook of where this person went and everything. The second one as well is that, like I was saying, there's some pictures of disease that you recognize. So like if you go again hunting and you catch a deer, and during your hunt, or you didn't catch a deer, but while you were walking, you notice that there's a tree that looks a little bit weird, or there's an animal that looks a little bit weird, just in case that instead of just saying, it's okay, maybe even GPS it and taking a pictures, and then bring that in and having kind of a console that is in charge of the healthcare group, so making sure that the infectious disease kind of group of it, so the would be able to warn and see if, and let's say we in 3 different group have noticed in the region X that there's this thing going on, then you close that from any like bury it, or you don't go there anymore and stuff, and so you close that to any more further people going in there, because there's maybe something going on. So again, it would be kind of a prevention, but at the same time identification. And then again, like I said, more inside, the identification of people with signs and symptoms. So if this person have symptoms and this person has symptoms, they have to recognize. But the problem is that there's one individual, all this information has to come through the same thing, because if one person doesn't really identify it, and the other one doesn't, and the third one doesn't, and the fourth one doesn't, well, they all think they're minor stuff, but what they don't realize is all 4 of them have the same thing, and so there's something there, as minor it is, but there's something there, and it's worth to investigate. Then from that, let's say we're talking about those 4 individuals, so what do we do with them? Do we quarantine them? Do we assess them? Who they got into contact? And then you would, so some very strict protocols of like quarantine would be probably the best way until they figured out what's going on. But also you have to track down now who's those people are, and maybe separate the sick versus the non-sick, and this the whole debate on what you do. And then the 4th one would be the treatment. So now if you can recognize that this one was hunting a deer, and there was a picture that the deer was kind of sick or whatever, or they ate certain kind of food, and all those 4 were attached to this, then you suspect that there would be probably this disease. Well, now how can we treat it, and how you would go with them. So anyway, that was a few ideas, and that kind of came on. And again, it's not a clear portrait, but I wanted to share a lot of those websites that I found, because they were quite interesting, and I thought some people would be enjoy it. And again, it's kind of a project ongoing, so hopefully there will be some conversation about it. So I would like to have your feedbacks on it. So, to you soon.